There's a pattern to dynastic wealth that most people fundamentally misunderstand. The world loves the fairy tale, the brilliant founder, the spectacular rise, the grand mansions, but the ending is almost always the same. Getting rich is hard. Staying rich for one generation is harder. Staying rich for 5 generations is nearly impossible. Consider the evidence. In 1973, when 120 descendants of the Vanderbilt family gathered for a family reunion, not one of them was a millionaire. The Vanderbilts went from being the richest family in America, builders of railroads, titans of industry, to being essentially broke in just 3 generations. That is the normal, predictable pattern. Fortunes built in 1 generation are spent in 3, but there is one family that broke that pattern. One dynasty that has been wealthy not for 3 generations but for 8, not for 50 years but for 210 years, not concentrated in one country but across 5 nations simultaneously. This is not luck, it is a system. The Rothschild family. In 1815, the 5 Rothschild brothers controlled more wealth than any single royal family in Europe. By 1850, they were routinely called the 6th great power of Europe, alongside nations like Britain, France, Austria, Prussia, and Russia. Not a nation, a family. Today, after 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the rise of communism, fascism, hyperinflation, and 8 full generations, their collective wealth is estimated at somewhere between $400 billion and $1 trillion across hundreds of descendants. Why? Because unlike the Vanderbilts, who lost it all, or the Rockefellers, who slowly diluted their holdings, the Rothschilds mastered something no other family has: the ability to stay invisible while staying wealthy, the ability to transfer power across generations without losing control, the ability to survive every financial crisis, every war, every revolution for over 2 centuries. This is the detailed chronicle of how one family became the richest in history. Not through a single brilliant founder, but through a resilient network and a strategy that has worked for 210 years and counting. This is the Rothschild pattern, and once you understand it, you will understand how dynastic wealth actually works. The story of perpetual wealth begins not in a palace, but in a prison. In 1744, Meyer Amschel Rothschild was born in the Frankfurt Judengasse, the Jewish ghetto, a single street walled off from the rest of the city where Jews were legally confined. The constraints that created genius. By law, Jews could not own land. They could not join trade guilds. They could not hold most professions. But they could lend money. Why? Because Christian law prohibited usury, the charging of interest on loans. Jews had no such prohibition. Thus, money lending became a Jewish profession, not by choice but by economic necessity. Meyer Amschel's father was a small-time money changer and trader. Meyer was orphaned at 13 and sent to work at the prestigious Oppenheimer Bank in Hanover. He learned 2 crucial things: how royal courts operated, and the immutable fact that powerful people always need money. He learned that the person who controls the money controls the powerful people. That was the foundational insight that built a dynasty. The entry point. By his 20s, Meyer Amschel returned to Frankfurt. He started dealing in rare collectible coins, not currency. So this was brilliant. Coin collecting was the fashionable hobby of European nobility, the equivalent of modern-day art collecting or yachting. It gave Meyer, a ghetto Jew, direct access to princes, dukes, and men of real power. In 1769, Meyer became the court factor, financial agent to Prince William III of Hanau. Prince William was one of the richest men in Europe, famous for renting out his Hessian soldiers to the British Crown to fight the American Revolution. Meyer managed Prince William's vast fortune, millions of pounds paid by the British Crown, investing it, lending it out, and taking a cut. This established Meyer's credibility and his personal fortune, the 5 sons strategy, the ultimate diversification. But Meyer Amschel was different from every other court Jew. He didn't keep the business to himself. He had 10 children, 5 sons, 5 daughters, and he trained all 5 sons in banking from childhood. Then he executed the most important structural decision in the history of dynastic wealth. He sent them to the different financial capitals of Europe to establish 5 autonomous yet centrally coordinated banks. Nathan, the 3rd son, went to London, N.M. Rothschild and Sons. James, the youngest, went to Paris, de Rothschild Frères. Salomon went to Vienna, S.M. von Rothschild. Karl went to Naples, C.M. de Rothschild. Amschel Jr., the eldest, stayed in Frankfurt, M.A. Rothschild and Sons. These cities were not just financial hubs. They were the political capitals of the 5 great powers emerging after the Napoleonic Wars. The Rothschilds had a bank in every major power simultaneously. They remained one family, one business, one loyalty. They could move money across borders before modern banking even existed. If the British government needed a loan, Nathan could arrange it, but the capital might come from James in Paris or Salomon in Vienna. This network meant they could finance anyone because they could tap capital from everywhere. The network was the foundation, but information was the weapon. In an era where communication traveled at the speed of horses and ships, the Rothschilds created a private, encrypted courier system faster than any government service. They used carrier pigeons, fast sailing boats, and relay riders. They knew what was happening in Paris before the British government did. They knew what was happening in Vienna before the French government did. That information advantage was worth more than the gold they moved. The day information became king, Waterloo 1815. The Battle of Waterloo would decide the fate of Europe. If Napoleon won, British government bonds would crash. If Britain won, bonds would soar. Nathan Rothschild was in London. The official messenger took days to arrive, but Nathan had agents at the battlefield. The moment Wellington defeated Napoleon, a Rothschild agent raced to the coast, took a private boat across the English Channel, and arrived in London on June 20th, a full day before the official messenger. Nathan Rothschild knew the outcome before the British Prime Minister did. Here is what he did next, which is meticulously documented. Nathan went to the London Stock Exchange and began selling British government bonds heavily. Everyone watching the revered Nathan panicked. They assumed, the Rothschilds always know first. If Nathan is selling, Napoleon must have won. Traders sold their bonds in a frenzied panic. British government bonds crashed to rock-bottom prices. While the price was lowest, Nathan's discreet agents began buying everything back quietly. When the official news arrived the next day that Wellington had won, British bonds soared back up. Nathan had bought at the absolute bottom. The exact profit is disputed, but it was enough to make Nathan Rothschild the richest man in Britain overnight. The Waterloo trade did more than create wealth. It proved that information was more valuable than armies. Financing the post-war world. Following Napoleon's defeat, Europe was broke and needed massive loans for reconstruction and war debt. The Rothschilds financed everyone, the British government, the Austrian emperor, the King of Prussia, the French monarchy, even the Vatican. Indispensable leverage. They became the indispensable financiers. If a European government needed money, they came to the Rothschilds because only the network could raise capital across multiple nations simultaneously. Controlling the revenue. Crucially, they didn't rely on trust. When they lent money to Naples, they took control of the tobacco tax revenues until the loan was repaid. When they lent to Austria, they controlled customs duties. They literally commanded the revenue streams that ensured repayment. By 1825, Nathan Rothschild in London was arguably more powerful than the Bank of England itself. When Britain faced a liquidity crisis that year, the Bank of England needed an emergency loan. They went to Nathan, who raised a staggering sum by coordinating gold and silver shipments across his brothers in Europe. The British government stabilized its banking system through the Rothschild network. Nathan was dubbed the Commander-in-Chief of the City of London, because whoever commands capital commands nations. The Rothschilds understood that concentrated wealth is vulnerable wealth. They began diversifying massively, moving beyond government loans into productive physical assets, the industrial empire. They didn't just finance the Industrial Revolution, they owned major parts of it. Railroads. They financed and held stakes in railroad construction across Europe, France's Chemin de Fer du Nord, Austria's Nordbahn. By 1860, they controlled more railroad mileage across the continent than any other single entity. Railroads were the technology of the age. Controlling them meant controlling trade and commerce. Mining. They gained control of the Almaden mercury mine in Spain, essential for silver refining worldwide. They later acquired stakes in Rio Tinto, copper and iron, and, famously, the De Beers diamond mines in South Africa. They controlled a significant portion of the world's mineral and diamond supply, physical wealth that retains value regardless of a market crash. Infrastructure. They financed the construction of the Suez Canal and later acquired shares. They financed oil exploration in Baku, modern Azerbaijan, through the Rothschild Oil Company. The Rothschilds were not just bankers, they were industrialists. They owned physical assets, mines, railroads, land, vineyards, that generated wealth even if financial markets collapsed. Financing both sides of the war, the ultimate hedge. This is the strategy that sets them apart and fuels many conspiracy theories. Yet it is historically documented. They financed both sides of wars simultaneously. The logic: why finance your enemy? 1. Guaranteed winner. You guarantee that no matter who wins, Prussia versus Austria, France versus Prussia, the victor will be indebted to you and can therefore pay you back. 2. Unbreakable leverage. A government fighting a war needs you. They cannot afford to antagonize their primary financier. 3. Profit maximization. Wars require massive instant capital injections. Interest rates are high, risk premiums are high, and the family was often the only source available across multiple countries. During the American Civil War, 1861-1865, their agent in New York helped finance the Union, North, while other agents explored options to finance the Confederacy, South. The Union won, and the Rothschilds profited from the Union bonds, later financing American railroad expansion. They made money from war, they made money from peace. They were never on one side, they were on the side of capital. The real genius of the Rothschilds was not getting rich, but staying rich. This required a rigid family structure and a set of rules established by Mayor Amschel that were followed for generations. The code of survival, consensus over individualism, all major business decisions required a consensus among the brothers. This prevented any single brother from destroying the family wealth through reckless individual decisions, a pitfall that later ruined other dynasties. Concentration of control, male heir rule. Only male heirs could inherit and control the business. While controversial today, this rule ensured wealth concentration. The Vanderbilts divided wealth among all children. The Rothschilds kept control with the sons, distributing wealth but not power, to the daughters via large dowries. Endogamy, cousin marriages. Marriages within the family were strongly encouraged. Over half of marriages in the 1800s were between cousins. This ensured that wealth never left the family circle, and that spouses were fully indoctrinated into the business as rules and secrets. Extreme discretion, the power of privacy. The Rothschilds pioneered financial privacy. Unlike the Vanderbilts, who built massive ostentatious mansions and hosted legendary publicized parties, the Rothschilds lived well but quietly. Their wealth was in banks, bonds, and businesses, not in visible display. Privacy protected them from envy, revolution, government scrutiny, and mob anger. When mobs burned palaces, they often left Rothschild properties alone. Multinational resilience. This was the structural firewall. When France had a revolution in 1848, the Paris branch was safe because the London, Vienna, and Naples branches continued to operate. When World War I destroyed the German and Austrian branches, the British and French branches preserved the family's core wealth. No single country's collapse could destroy the entire family. Surviving catastrophe, this resilience was tested repeatedly. World War I-II, the family survived by being diversified across the winners, London, Paris, and the losers, Vienna, Frankfurt. While the Nazis seized assets in continental Europe, the American and British branches preserved the family's financial integrity. The Russian Revolution, 1917. The Bolsheviks seized all their Russian investments, a massive loss, but because the loss was only a fraction of their total global wealth, the family absorbed it and moved on. The Great Depression. They lost money like everyone else, but they maintained control of their core banks, NM Rothschild in London, etc. They rode out the crisis, and when World War II began, they were perfectly positioned to finance the Allied war effort, making back their losses through war loans. Most people believe the Rothschilds lost their wealth in the 20th century. That's a deliberate misunderstanding. They simply adapted and went deeper into the shadows. The modern structure, Rothschild & Co. Today, the main operations are concentrated in Rothschild & Co. Paris and London, one of the world's leading independent financial advisory firms, specializing in mergers and acquisitions, M&A, corporate finance, and wealth management. They are still central players in global finance. Edmund de Rothschild Group. Founded in 1953, this separate branch controls vast private banking and wealth management operations, with assets under management estimated at over $150 billion. Physical and luxury assets. They maintain massive diversified holdings, Chateau Lafite Rothschild and Chateau Mouton Rothschild, some of the finest and most expensive wine brands in the world, large land holdings, vast private art collections, and investments in modern sectors like clean energy, technology, and real estate. The $1 trillion question, the art of being unlisted. How much are they worth? Nobody knows for certain, and that is the final brilliant stroke of the system. The Forbes fallacy. When you see billionaire lists like Forbes, the Rothschilds barely appear. This is because these lists track publicly disclosed wealth tied to public companies. The Rothschild wealth is intentionally distributed across hundreds of descendants, private trusts, foundations, and offshore holdings. The real value. Conservative estimates place their current wealth at $400 billion. Aggressive estimates, which account for hidden assets and compounding interest over 8 generations, reach $1 trillion or more. They are almost certainly richer than the Waltons, $247 billion, and potentially richer than any other family on earth, excluding the massive Saudi royal family. The ultimate lesson. The Vanderbilts showed off their wealth and lost everything. The Rothschilds stay off the lists and keep everything. They pioneered the use of trusts and opaque legal structures to transfer wealth across generations while minimizing taxes and maximizing family control, the exact playbook later adopted by the Rockefellers. The Rothschild system for generational wealth can be distilled into 6 rules, rules that every aspiring billionaire, company, or empire should heed. 1. Start with the information advantage. Know what's happening before it's public. 2. Diversify across countries and industries. Never let a single national collapse or industry crash destroy you. 3. Maintain family control. Long-term thinking. Family members run the business, prioritizing preservation over centuries. 4. Stay private. Privacy protects you from envy, from government scrutiny, and from predators. 5. Control the revenue stream. Guarantee repayment by controlling the revenue streams of your debtors. 6. Survive crisis. Be patient, maintain liquidity, and buy assets cheap during panics. This is the real story of the Rothschild dynasty. Not a conspiracy theory about controlling the world, but a chillingly effective study in resilience, network strategy, and the simple, brutal mathematics of wealth preservation. They didn't just get rich, they built a financial machine designed to be indestructible for 210 years.